On the way home from a gig today, I had an interesting experience. I had to rehearsal with a singer I'd never met, and she's a Jewish lady, and we're doing a gala at this Jewish synagogue associated with this like a synagogue, not Reform, not Orthodox or anything like that. But anyway, she was asking. I said I'm moving. I'm in the middle of a move, and that's why I don't have the sheet music here because some of my stuff is in a storage unit, blah, blah, blah. And she was asking why we're moving, where are we moving? And I mentioned I've got kids with special needs, and she's asking about the different special needs and saying, yeah, I've got a special needs kids too. It's really important to have the resources and autism, ADHD, depression. And then she confided me, and you know, a lot of the resources that are available to help her kid are on the chopping block of Doge. This country would just absolutely implode if you suddenly make things like that people are dependent on unavailable. Here's the problem: there's no nuance. It's a chainsaw, not a surgical pair of scissors that they're making these cuts with. And they don't care whose life it affects. They don't care about the lives. It's clear. Anyway, we were talking, and she's just like, this country is changing so fast, and it's hard to even keep up with it, and it is scary. She's telling me, I was telling my husband, there is a difference between real Christians and that, movement that even she knows. She's Jewish, and she knows that. She's telling me there's a difference between real Christianity and what's going on out there. And she's like, that's not Jesus, that's not Christianity. Now it's interesting, she didn't know I'm a Christian yet. We hadn't talked about that, but she felt to bring it up. That's on the top of her lips, that this is not Christian. What does that tell me? It tells me that people are making a connection between Christianity and this. And they're making a distinction. Some of them are having to make a distinction and say that is not Christianity, which means, you don't have a counterfeit unless you have the real thing. I believe God is drawing people to the real thing, but not in the way you would expect. I did a message about 2 years ago called Bring on the 144,000, because I don't believe the church is any more equipped to preach the gospel. We don't have the gospel in a uniform way. We don't have a unified voice. And anytime you preach the gospel, the Christians are the ones that come after you, tell you you're looking for a license to sin and all this stuff. The 144,000 won't have that problem because this drunken whore that called Christendom is going to be judged. And I don't know what that'll look like, but judgment begins in the house of God, and right now the terrors are being manifested. Not just to the church, but before the whole world. And see, when the world can see the false, they can also distinguish the true. And there's a reason why during the tribulation, there will be the greatest harvest in the history of the world among Gentiles. Through the 144,000, through the two witnesses, through the angel, through whatever residue of witnesses left. But it'll be after the judgment, I believe, of that great whore. She has to get out of the way. She's a stumbling block to the Gentiles, cause the Gentiles to blaspheme. This is the hardening of the Gentile branch, and it's cutting off. Now, I'm blocking people left and right. If you've been on my channel for a year, and you know what I teach about Mystery Babylon and the apostasy that's going on, and you think I've suddenly deviated and I'm talking about politics, and you feel like that's an opportunity to defend your vote on my wall and argue about politics, I'm blocking you. Because you're blind. I am not talking about a political movement. I'm talking about an apostasy. And people can't see this because they're blind and they're caught up in this leaven which blinds you. It's Jezebel's wine. The leaven is part of Jezebel's wine that makes the church drunk and seduces God's servants to commit fornication and eat things sacrificed to idols. That's what this is. It's part of Jezebel's wine. And it's producing a drunken whore who stammers in her speech, can't say anything coherent, staggers around, but thinks she's the bride of Christ. Somebody got on my wall and said, they've been listening to my channel. You know, they've been listening to this message. And then they said, well, it's clear that you've just been seduced by the NPR, MSNBC, and you just want more brown people. You succumb to white guilt and you want more brown people. I say, if you're here illegally, you should be afraid. Blocked them. I hope whatever you've done illegal comes to the surface. Many of them have a more legitimate reason for doing what they're doing than the crap you do. Somebody else was saying, a couple people were sanctimoniously saying, well, we're supposed to obey our leaders and, you know, obey the civil authorities so that and pray for them so that it may be, and they quote Timothy, they may be peaceful. It's like, come on, man, you haven't spent any time praying for leaders till Trump got in. Maybe you prayed at some rally, but you're not praying. And then they said, a couple people have said the choice is clear. They're defending their vote. I don't care who you voted for, but they said why they voted. They said the other side is openly immoral, openly ungodly. At least our side, that's how they said it, pretends to call on the name of God and honor him. At least they keep the pretense. I couldn't believe they said this. As if cleansing the outside of the cup is pleasing to God. And they said that God's going to continue to, you know, we don't know how long this blessing is going to be here, but that's why we vote this way. It's a clear choice. Well, Jesus didn't go and hang around the Pharisees. He went around and hang around with the sinners, with the people that you call openly immoral. And the reason is because he can see the heart, and he can see how corrupt you are and what a hypocrite you are. He can see that you cleanse the outside of the cup, and inwardly you're full of dead men's bones, and you're full of hatred. You know, in the world, they have no hope. So they just do whatever they can to self-medicate and survive. And God said of Nineveh, you know, he said they don't know their right hand from their left. When Jonah was mad that Nineveh repented, because Jonah was a self-righteous ass. God is not pleased with people who take his name in their lips and their heart is far from him. And you can know that your heart is far from him because you have no sympathy or humanity towards people. And I think that there's a lot of people on my wall who reveal that they've never been around people and they have no idea what people go through and they don't even know how to have a conversation. They demonize and dehumanize people who don't belong to their tribe. And they're not, you know, they talk about how they're engaged in politics because they vote, but they didn't vote because of politics. They voted because of their tribe. And they believe they're in the right tribe, and the other people are openly demonic and ungodly. Which just shows that you don't know what true Satanism, Luciferianism is, because the roots of MAGA are pure Satanism, pure Luciferianism. Meritocracy is Satanism. You don't understand who Satan is. He's a moralist. He's a religious moralist. He was beautifully created and wise and perfect in all his ways. And he believed he was so great that he should ascend to the heavens and be worshipped. And he wanted, obviously, to reign over the earth. But God created a clay creature, someone weak. He chose the foolish things that Satan despised, and gave him dominion over the works of his hands. That offended Satan. And Satan came and seduced man to bring him into depravity, to disqualify him, to force God to disqualify man. Satan brought sin to man to try to destroy him out of jealousy and hatred for his weakness. He did not believe he was fit to have the dominion over the works of God's hands. And then God probably surprised, I'm sure Satan was surprised by justification, that God went ahead and qualified the ungodly who work not, but believe on him who justifies the ungodly. Their faith is counted to him as righteousness, and made them heirs. And not only that, but through the death and resurrection of Christ, he lifted up humanity and set it at the right hand of God, where Satan wanted to go, and made him rule not only over the earth, but over angels. So Satan hates man, and Satan accuses God of being unjust and immoral for dealing with man. And Satan, Mystery Babylon, created a version of Satan that is associated with everything depraved. But actually, all the depravity comes from, the abominations come from the harlot, which is really a human origin. But it's from sin within, so Satan did bring that. But there's a version of Satan that that you associate with immorality and ungodliness and what you think is immoral, the sexual sins and all these different things. Okay, but the real Luciferian religion, and this is like you read Helen Blavatsky and Alice Bailey and Albert Pike, you find out that the real Luciferian light is moral. It's upright. It's a satanic moralism rooted in a hatred of people who are lazy, who are weak, who are not worthy. It's kind of like social Darwinism, where might makes right, and the wise and the strong and the initiated and the powerful, those are the ones who have the right to rule. Everybody else is stakes on the table by choice and consent, because they won't invest in themselves and lift themselves up by the bootstraps, get to work and do what it takes to be. And it comes from not recognizing that God is the author of everything and being thankful for what you have. Instead, you take pride in it and think you're better. That's the real satanic Luciferian principle. It's a meritocracy. It was first manifested in the world at Babel, where people were judged based on their productivity in building up the tower. If you were building something for their kingdom, you were useful and you were promoted. If you were not, you were considered useless and cut off. But that's not how God thinks of things, and that's not what he created. He values lilies and birds that don't sow or reap or gather or do anything, and he clothes them with more glory than Solomon. He values life for life because he is love. This is something that Satan cannot understand. He thought by bringing man into judgment, God would surely judge man, but instead God became a man and became sin and became the curse. He took man's place, took the judgment, so that this offer could stay open. Not only stay open, that man could be qualified to be co-heirs together with Christ, raised up and seated with him in the heavens. Sinful, fallen, wicked, supposedly, men. You know who's disqualified is those who think they're righteous and who hate people. Now, the root of this austerity that's coming where people are going to get benefits cut left and right, the social safety net is going to be cut, is because the billionaires believe that workers, if you work for a wage, they think you're an idiot. They don't care about workers other than whether you're useful, but in their financial view, that you're just an idiot. You work for a wage and you pay most of what you work for in taxes. You haven't bought any assets. You haven't built anything. You're useless. And you're poor because you're stupid. That's how they think. And it is true. We are stupid. We're not that wise in this world. If I was smart, I would buy assets, and then I would borrow against those assets and buy more assets, and then borrow against that and live off of, pay the interest on the loans, never pay them off, just pay the minimal interest, while my assets accumulate in value, and I just keep opening lines of credit and buying more assets and paying myself and living lavishly. That's what they do. That's how they live. Whether you think that's ethical or not, and that's why they don't pay taxes. They don't own anything. They've got it all sheltered. And our tax system is not set up for workers to benefit. They're set up for rich people who own assets that are appreciating to borrow against for their lavish lifestyles. So they think you're an idiot for not participating. That path is open to you. Why didn't you take it? Why didn't you save up and buy an asset and do something? Well, it's because you can't control your appetites, because you're useless and immoral and lazy. That's how they think about you. That's how billionaires think about you. If you're a worker, read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That's the attitude. No matter how smart you are, if you're working for a wage, you're an idiot. Okay? And you deserve, because you're so stupid, for them to take everything. You could have that if you wanted, if you weren't so lazy and unprincipled. That's how they look at it. You haven't saved and bought assets that are accumulating value and increasing your wealth, and so you're still a wage slave. Well, that's because you can't delay your gratification, and you have to have your TV and your fast food and your garbage. Well, if it kills you, good. You're just taking up space. And that is not the left or the right. That is the meritocracy, the oligarchs, the king class. That's the way they think of us, and they're taking control. And yes, they're going to cut everything. They're not there to work for the working class. They needed the working class to vote them in. So they promised the working class, we're going to cut your taxes, we're going to do all this stuff. No, they're not. If they give you the dividend, supposed dividend, that's if they make $2 trillion. If they find save $2 trillion, then they're going to supposedly cut us all checks. Well, that's just, the thing is that by doing that and not actually paying down the debt, but giving you the money, they're just deferring all that debt, which is inflationary, which means that the cash that they give you is worth less the minute it hits your bank. You think that they're doing something for you. They're not. They're just distracting you with bread and circus while they take everything. And the way they convinced the Pharisees, those who hate God's way of justification, to vote for them, is by telling them that their enemies are wanting to, turn their kids into transvestites. And yes, those movements were really happening, but it was all done to shock you. It was all manipulated. It was all engineered. They did the most deliberately outlandish things to provoke the predictable reaction so that you would vote in what they wanted in the first place. If you go back and read the Protocols of Zion, they predicted all of this. They said this is exactly what we're going to do. That's their principles. They always tell you exactly what they're going to do before they do it. They said they're going to flood the media and the newspapers, at the time it was the newspapers, with filth, blackmail all the politicians and anybody in any kind of place of influence, blackmail them, get them involved in all kinds of sexual activities, and then expose it all at once in this huge, immoral feast of depravity that will be so bad that the world will cry out for them to clean it up. Okay, now in comes their version of religion, which looks like Judeo-Christianity because it's Satanism wrapped in biblical terminology. And they said they would do that too. Alice Bailey and Blavatsky said, we're going to use Orthodox Christianity. We're going to gut their interpretations. We're going to use the Masons to occupy the pulpits, and we're going to gut the biblical Orthodox interpretations and replace it with the true revelation of their mysteries. And this is the mystery schools. These are the satanic mysteries that Jesus referred to in the letter to the church of Thyatira, as many as do not know the depths of Satan. I don't hold anything else against you. These are Jezebel and her children that commit fornication with her, and her servants that commit fornication with her or adultery with her, and her children that Jesus said he's going to throw into the great tribulation if they don't repent. And they have the deeds of Satan, the doctrines of Satan, the mysteries of Satan, as they speak, in the church, replacing biblical theology with satanic doctrine. And see, we have a hocus pocus view of witchcraft that says it's about black cauldrons and Ouija boards and all this nonsense. And Satanism means all this depravity, and that if they're going to have satanic doctrines, it means they're going to be teaching you how to, have orgies at the Lord's table. No, pure Satanism is moralism, self-righteousness, meritocracy. We will exclude those who are not in this, and dominionism and Calvinism, this thing that's coming together, this dominionistic establish the kingdom movement, but it's not God's kingdom, it's Satan's. Okay, they are presenting themselves as leaders of the church and doing everything they can to stigmatize the gospel. Okay, and also pin every evil, wicked thing that you could imagine. Brand Christianity with Trump's face so that you cannot distinguish between Trump and his followers, the MAGA crowd, and biblical Christianity and the gospel. You don't know anymore. The world doesn't know. And that's why it was gratifying to me that this, Jewish lady was saying, I know that's not Christianity. Because they can still see a difference. They know that the real must be true. But it's only because she's been exposed to it in different ways. And clearly God's working on her. The so-called Christians in this country are absolutely merciless. So I got cut off, and I'll have to edit these two things together. But I was saying that, we have this hocus pocus view of witchcraft. And why did I bring up witchcraft? Well, because Jezebel's work, she is, and I get into this in so many other places. I don't want to duplicate everything, but Jezebel represents the bridge between Babel and Mystery Babylon, because she brought the Babylonian mysteries in the form of what's called Baal worship into the camp and replaced the worship of Jehovah with the worship to Baal. However, the people still thought they were worshiping Jehovah, and initially. So when she had Naboth stoned, for example, the people thought they were stoning him for blasphemy against Jehovah, but it was actually the work of servants of Baal and their lies that they believed. So they were serving Baal, thinking they were doing service to Jehovah. And we see a recapitulation of that in the Inquisitions and in the Roman Catholic Church, and later in the Salem witch trials, and among the Puritans. When you see this kind of supposedly God-ordained persecution of the saints in the name of Christ, that's Jezebel's work, and it's the result of witchcraft. Witchcraft is not hocus pocus. Witchcraft is manipulation. It's a manipulative tactic to say, oh yeah, witchcraft has to do with cauldrons and black magic and Ouija boards and stuff like that. That makes it so that you look at something else and don't realize when you're being bewitched. And remember, Paul said in Galatians 3, who has bewitched you, before whose eyes Jesus Christ has been openly portrayed as crucified. And then he said, this I would learn from you. Did you receive the Spirit by the hearing of faith and the works of the law? And the point was that the witchcraft in that time was from the Judaizers, who were telling them that they had to work in order to secure what only Christ provides by free gift, and the Spirit being the focus. Well, witchcraft gets your eyes off the Spirit as the blessing of the gospel and gets you onto earthly things and gets you working for a wage in Satan's kingdom, thinking you're serving Christ. And this ends up tending towards persecution of those who have the genuine testimony of Christ, among other things. But, in the letters to the 7 churches, Jesus mentioned the depths of Satan, the mysteries of Satan, to the letter of Pergamos. And he also, that letter mentions Baal worship, talking about Balaam, who seduced the servants to commit fornication and eat things sacrificed to idols. That's a reference to the Baal worship that Balaam tricked the Israelites to get involved with in Numbers. But then and he says you also have the seed of Satan there. You have the doctrine of Balaam, and there are the Satan's seat is there. I'm sorry, at Pergamos. Then at Thyatira, he mentions Jezebel, who also seduces my servants to eat things sacrificed to idols, commit fornication. This is Baal worship, but instead of in Numbers bringing them outside the camp to the surrounding nations to involve them in their feasts, Jezebel brings it into the camp and actually sets up Baal worship in the temple, replacing all the priests with loyalists to Baal. And Baal is a false Christ. Baal is Tammuz, the son of Nimrod at Babel, who they capitalized on the promise of the seed of the woman and said he was the promised Christ. And this is the origin of all the pagan religions. It comes from Babel. When it's split, because God confounded the languages, the names of the deities changed as the different nations formed and the languages formed, but it's the same thing at the root. Tammuz is Nimrod's offspring and represents the building work and the meritocracy that we're talking about, and is a false Christ. He's an antichrist, and Jezebel brought that into the camp, and she brings it into Christendom. So in Thyatira, he says, you tolerate that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophet, to seduce my servants to eat things sacrificed to idols, commit fornication, and those have spiritual meanings pointing back to Baal worship. But he says that I'm going to cast her into a bed of affliction, a sick bed, and those who commit adultery with her into great tribulation, and I'll kill her children with death, and all the churches will know that I'm the one who tries the reins of the hearts. And he says, but as many as those of you who do not have this doctrine, nor have known the depths of Satan as they speak, I will put no other burden on you. Now the depths of Satan there are the mysteries of Satan, the mysteries of the Babylonian mysteries, the mystery of Luciferianism that's at the root of meritocracy. Okay, and it comes in the form of works righteousness. It replaces Christ with the hard taskmaster, Baal, Tammuz, and gets you building and measures your value based on what you build. But you're not building the new city of Jerusalem with gold, silver, and precious stones. You're building with wood, hay, and stubble. You're building in this world, and you're measured by how you do with respect to the world's building, even though it's religious. This is what happens. See, at Babel, you have the leaven of Herod, really, but Herod wasn't on the scene yet. But it's the mixture of the state power and the religion, and it's ultimately in opposition to God, and eventually it directly opposes God. But it may start out as seeming to serve God if that's convenient, and that's what this is. In the West, the church has been bewitched into works righteousness, which leads them further and further into Baal worship. And you can see it when they repudiate Christ and his doctrine. And that's what's happened in most of the institutional churches. That's what's happening definitely in the mega crowd. You talk about grace to most of them, you see what happens. And it produces cruel people who are heartless and really do believe that when people's benefits are cut off, or what, they call them entitlements sometimes just to provoke you. But when they cut off the funding for people's living and people can't get their needs met, they believe that this is a just judgment on these lazy, ungodly, unrighteous people. The people like atheists like Elon Musk, who may very well be a Satanist, he dressed as the Baphomet for Halloween, he believes that poor people just deserve to suffer because they're so stupid. And that's the way the elites believe. They're not ever fighting for the natural for the working class unless they're trying to get the working class's support. They'll pretend to fight for the working class, but all their rules, all the laws they pass end up working against the working class. And it is warfare. It is a class war. They are, especially with automation and AI, once they find a way to replace us, and they don't need us, then there will be no need for us. There will be no more us. That's their view. They want to depopulate the earth when it's time. And they'll live in the utopia where they've got as much of the finite resources as they could want, and nobody's in their way. Unless you're one of their slaves for entertainment, there's no need for you. That's the drive towards superintelligence and automation and robotics, all that stuff. That's what their goal is as atheists. But the religious, useful idiots, the Pharisees, think it's a matter of morality. They believe that people are poor and hurting and destitute and needy because they're ungodly and God's judging them. And they really believe that it is a righteous judgment to terrorize these people who they believe are enemies of God and enemies of all that is godly. Okay, so that's the dehumanization that's happening, and where that guy on my wall made that comment about how, well, the battle lines are clear and the other camp is all openly ungodly. It's because you don't understand what Satanism is, and you don't know that you're embracing satanic principles. The gospel is that God is for people. He really is. He's for people, and he's interested in reconciling them to himself and providing for them. And I'm not saying you have to be a socialist. You can be fiscally conservative and all that stuff, but right now, there's a lot of people that are going to start suffering. And if you think that that's God's righteous judgment, you're on the wrong team. You're definitely on the wrong team. You're not on the side of the gospel. And it's a dominionistic thing. And the other thing that in the letters to the 7 churches is the synagogue of Satan, who say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. These are dominionists that believe theirs is the kingdom. And they believe their works righteousness qualifies them for it. And they believe it's their job to purge the earth of the infidel, the ungodly. And if you don't believe me, I don't have it in front of me, but if you go back in my Trends in Apostasizing Christianity playlist, there is I think part 4 I read some of the quotes of the NAR and what they believe is their role in the tribulation. They believe their role is to execute God's judgment on enemies of morality. They say enemies of Christ, but they're antichrist. They have a different Christ, a different Jesus. Okay, I have to get going. This is kind of a rant, obviously. And I'll have to patch this in. I was just trying to finish the thought from yesterday, but they may not patch together really well. But I think these, with the other videos I've done, will kind of paint a picture of where I believe we are. All right, take care.